Andre, welcome to Fanacheck, man.
Thanks for having me. Should be fun. Should be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. I've done a deep dive on your career, man. Obviously, I was familiar with you going into this, but and I knew you how a lot of people know you from the Monster Squad, of course. But I've done a big deep dive. You've done a ton of work, a lot of cool work. So I want to talk about that.
Sure.
You're in North Carolina right now, correct?
Currently, yeah, just was traveling a little bit and working on some events and some appearances, and North Carolina is sort of my second home, if you will, because I have family here. My mother was from Eastern North Carolina, and I've been coming here my entire life because it's one of my favorite places.
Sure.
And I actually went to college in North Carolina, so it's it's even more of a second home than most.
Where'd you go to school?
I played basketball in college, which a lot of people don't know. But
wow.
my first school was an old 2-year private school called Lewisburg College, which is just north of Raleigh. And then my best friend and I from there got recruited to play at UNC Asheville. So I'm a UNC Asheville grad as well.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know you were a baller.
At one time, yeah.
And you grew up in LA?
I did. Born and raised in LA, and then went from LA to college.
Gotcha. I lived in LA for a number of years. So I was in the Navy for a long time, and then I got stationed out in Oxnard. So I was up in Point Mugu in Ventura County, and then moved down to LA. Lived in Van Nuys for a number of years. That's where I met my wife. She lives out here. She's from here, Nashville area, but she went to USC, graduated, and stayed out there. So
so you guys kind of did that. Okay, got
it. A little bit.
Yeah.
We were actually actors. So I was an actor for a number of years, mostly like Second City. So I did a lot of stuff in LA, a few movies, and then I was actually did Second City in Las Vegas for a bit as well.
Oh yeah, got it. Well,
before hanging it up.
Before
my IMDb does not look like yours, brother.
It's mine doesn't look like some other people's that I'm jealous of as well. But it's fun. What did you do in the Navy? My dad was in the Navy, and I have a bunch of Navy friends. So
right on. So I was in the Navy for 9 years. The first 6 years I was on submarines.
That's a tough job.
I've been all over the world, man. I've been every continent except for Antarctica. But so I mostly did navigation on submarines the first 6 years, and then my last 3 years is when I went out to Oxnard out there. I worked for the Naval Space Program. So I lived in Oxnard, but I was stationed at Point Mugu, which is all right there in Ventura County. Well, so what I thought we'd do is I thought I'd start with some of the stuff you're currently working on. It looks like you have 3 projects in production. One that's coming out in 2024. Care to talk about any of those?
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
Excellent, man. Let's talk about Bloodstreams.
Bloodstreams. Yeah, it's this is an interesting story, which has a little bit of backstory to it. Bloodstreams is a film that's written and directed by a buddy of mine named Derek Johnson. Derek Wayne Johnson is a cool filmmaker friend of mine with his producing partner Chris May, who has they've made a handful of really awesome documentaries. The first one called The King of the Underdogs, which is about the director John G. Avildsen. Which I highly recommend if you're a
Did that come out on Ace or Adam Carolla's platform? Did Adam Carolla have something to do with that, or am I me? Because I remember him talking a lot about it.
He may have talked about it just because I think there's so many rad, faces and names and movies.
Yeah.
So that's a good one to check out. And then he also made one called about Frank Stallone, which was pretty cool. But anyway, so back in, we're all in the middle of, this thing called COVID, shut down, world's on pause. And Derek called me and was like, hey, this is like April of 21. And he said, hey, man, what are you doing in July? And I was like, I have no idea. What are you doing in July? And he said, well, look, a project that we were going to work on is not happening. I've got to do something. I just want to know if you're in, then I'm going to go put something together. I said, I'm in. What is it? He goes, I don't know. I haven't written it yet. So they worked on it for a couple of months and sent me a script. And it was this awesome kind of small town crime noir, current day kind of crime noir thing that I was the lead in. I was supposed to be the lead in this film. And I just loved it. I love doing, just go do something. Let's just go do it. And so I was gearing up to do that. And what a lot of people know, but don't know the reason behind it, I was doing sort of a very public Instagram kind of like activity challenge. Like, it was like, I did it like #active with Andre. Like, we've all been sitting around because we don't have anything to do. We can't go anywhere. And so let's just get out and move. Let's walk. Let's go swimming. Let's, play a little tennis, or just what did you do today? Like do some yoga, do anything. And I did that for about 2 months, and I ended it about the week before I was supposed to go. I was secretly trying to get in shape to go do this movie. Right. And what ended up coming to pass is the week before I was supposed to fly out, I had the ticket and the booking, and Chris was going to pick me up at the airport. The week before I was supposed to fly out to Texas to go shoot this movie with Derek is when I had my heart attack.
Right.
And so I was unable to do Bloodstreams in the original form that I was planning on it, which was the lead. So, and that sucked because I was really looking forward to playing this character. And, fast forward a year and a half, and, Derek, and then they got the movie done, and they had actually, I think, teamed up with this other distribution company. I don't know the whole ins and outs of it, but they were looking for some, added scenes and some added, kind of context. And so Derek wrote a cold open scene and brought me in to play this character in the cold open. So I apparently I open up this scene with this kind of monologue scene.
Oh, right on.
And I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it kind of opens up the movie. And so that was cool to at least still be a part of Bloodstreams, sure, even though I just had this cold open scene, which is it, instead of being the lead, which I was really looking forward to. But, when you go down with a massive heart attack playing tennis on a Saturday morning, sometimes you got to change your plans.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, and it worked for Drew Barrymore in Scream, right?
It did. I think so. It's fine. I love the cold open thing. It's great.
Yeah.
In fact, Henry McComas and I have this great project with an amazing cold open, since we're talking about those. So Bloodstreams, hopefully they're going to get that kind of put to bed and out to the world here soon. And what was great is we actually got to add a scene with Ryan Lambert, from Monster Squad.
Sure.
So he plays a character in one scene as well. And we buckled that all in. Kind of, Ryan and I were in Texas doing 2 weeks of appearances and screenings, and we said, "Hey, we're in town. Do you want to shoot those scenes now?" And Derek said, "Yes, let's do it." So we made it work, and it's always fun to kind of jump into something like that. So that's one of the projects that I got to do, in this past year.
Nice. You got 3 more in production. Are they like principal photography already done? Or are you in post? What's going on with those?
Yeah, these are all things that I got asked to be a part of instead of making, which is, always fun. But then, when you're used to kind of like being the one putting it together and making it happen, it's not hard to switch gears, but it's an interesting experience. Another film, actually Texas-based, ironically, was a film made by a group of filmmakers led by a guy named David Ryan in Dallas area. And they had put together kind of this fun little thing that it's a demon. It's another demon movie. It's a demon possession movie, but it's really kind of a tongue in cheek. We know what it is. Campy romp through the toy collectibles world, because the toy collectible world, which I knew was a thing, I didn't know it was as big as a thing as it is. And I came to connect with these guys by doing a podcast with a couple of the guys that actually star, Craig and Cincy, who have their own podcast. And they asked later, I was on their podcast just as a guest, just talking about this and talking about toy collectibles and some of the old commercials that I had done for old kind of what are now vintage toys. And so then, they were making this movie and asked if I would, want to come in and be a part of it. And I said, look, what's the timing? What's it look like? What's it going to be? And the timing worked out great, where I was able to fly in for a day and do a scene in this amazing toy store called Dallas Vintage Toys. And this place is incredible. And I came in, whipped out a couple scenes in this thing, and then a few months later, the movie was wrapped, and they actually screened it. And now it's kind of out. It's kind of festivaling a little bit, so we're helping with that. And it's a fun little campy kind of romp through the toy collectible world where people's heads explode. And so that's always fun.
And which one is that?
That's Retro Freaks.
That's Retro Freaks. That's what I thought you were referring to. Yeah, I was checking that out on IMDb. That's what I'm looking here on my phone. Yeah, it looked like a fun one about that toy collecting world. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's
Yeah,
a real big deal.
it is a real big deal,
Yeah.
and which is rad because I feel sort of connected in that world as well, where I'm not an expert on it, but I kind of grew up with most of these toys that they talk
Sure.
about. But not only did I grow up with some of these toys, but I was also in the commercials for a
That's
lot of these
wild, man.
toys. So that's another kind of body of work that's not on the IMDb resume that we got to have some cool conversations about that, and I still jump on their show every now and again and talk about stuff. So it's fun to be a part. Now I feel like I'm part of their kind of cool world as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, like that's one cool thing about acting. I feel like you become part of these communities. If you do a horror film, you're part of that community. If it's a popular franchise, obviously, I feel like the Monster Squad's a whole community, toy collecting community. I think it's really neat. I mean, it's kind of like you keep wetting your beak on it, both financially and for your soul, meeting new people. I think it's pretty neat.
For sure, it's fun to be a part of being in more than one world.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever get to keep any of the toys when you did the commercials?
I don't know if I did a lot of, there was a very interesting time where I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years worth of span that, normally when you're an actor or especially a kid actor and say you're reading for auditions for toys, there's a client being the toy company, whatever it is. And then there's a ad agency, and then there's a casting company, and they put everything together. What was interesting is, after a couple of repeat Mattel commercials, for, like I said, 4 or 5 years, I just ended up going just straight doing Mattel commercials. Like I didn't even audition for them.
Oh, wow.
And it even got to the point where I would have to go to the audition sessions, but I'm already in the commercials. We're just like reading and doing the shtick with whatever kids are going to be in it as well. And that was at Ogilvy and Mather, which, if you know, advertising is like literally one of the, the icons of advertising. And so they were the client. So we used to go to the Ogilvy office, and I used to spend hours on weekdays and just, kind of going through these auditions. And then like the next week we would shoot these, commercials, anywhere from, Hot Wheels to Masters of the Universe. There was a girl's toy called Poochie, which was this doll so I was the Poochie kid. So it's like,
it had a song too, didn't there? Wasn't there like a little jingle to Poochie?
There was. I'm not singing it, Jack. I'm not singing it. I see what you're trying to do there.
But I do recall that Poochie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And, which is amazing. If you look back, these are on YouTube. You can see these commercials, and it's fun to, reminisce. But, I don't know if I got given some of the Master Universe stuff. I know some of the time you can't, because you're introducing new product that doesn't exist yet. And so you can't be running around the schoolyard, with like, a new Beast Man or something. So
right.
It's one thing that I do remember is an obscure toy that was sort of an answer to the early Transformers, and it was called Towbot. And it was just it was a truck, and like that you did it and it transformed into a thing, like a guy. And I think they were trying to launch sort of like a competing line to this new thing called Transformers. And what's interesting is Michael Bay is not making the Towbot movie, but so I don't think that toy caught on as well. But I do have I had the Towbot truck for a while. It was like this toy that had like an active winch. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I just remember shooting that commercial and keeping that toy for a while.
That's funny. Yeah, I feel like around that time there were several different companies that had the transforming thing in the toys. Because there was a company called Mask. They did it too. I think they had a cartoon as well.
Mask
stood for something. MASK.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you didn't want to back the wrong horse. If you're going to buy one, you didn't want to spend all your money on the one that doesn't make it,
That's right. There was a ton of like that, especially, whether they're coming out of like Japanese anime style programming or comics. There was like, there was Voltron, and then there was Thundercats and all these
lines.
Yeah. It was all these other things. Right. And those are cool stuff.
Right on. Well, what I was hoping to do, so what I do on my podcast is I go through what I call the IMDb rabbit hole. So whether it's old TV shows, I have themes. Like sometimes I'll do I did a whole season on TV shows that are based on movies, but not well. Like Dirty Dancing was a TV show, and Fast Times was a TV show, that kind of stuff. And I just love connecting all the dots. And I've gone through your career. I rarely get to do it with someone that I'm doing it on. Like this is a real rare treat for me to be able to talk about some of this stuff with you.
Gotcha.
So if you'll indulge me, man, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I have some questions, but your first IMDb credit, 1979, The Man in the Santa Claus Suit. That was Fred Astaire's final TV role. That's pretty cool.
When you look back, kind of prior to moving on, talking about, an amazing group of people that I actually am on screen with, or, worked in the same project with, that's a pretty cool list, when you actually look
Sure.
at that. A lot of people don't have that to say. Yeah, Man in Santa Claus Suit came out in 79. I think we shot it in 77, 78, Christmas movie,
Mhm.
network television type thing back when that was big. Back in the
Yeah.
day, you always had these holiday specials, and it ran every Christmas for about 20 years.
Wow.
And what was neat about that is it was one of the kind of like first, kind of big TV or movie type things that I did. Uh, I was 5, 6 years old, something like that, and I, I remember it very well. And I had I had quite a bit to do, and it was sort of a vignette movie where Fred Astaire is playing the shop
Mhm.
owner that sells costumes, and of
Sure.
course it's Christmas, so everybody wants Santa suits. And then there's, I think, three storylines with different leads and plot lines that all end up intersecting at this costume shop. And what it really ends up being a cool tale is that Fred Astaire, the costume shop guy, is actually Santa Claus, and he's renting these Santa Claus suits to I think it's Gary Berghoff, Bert Convey, and I'm forgetting the third. And he some way helps them in their trials and tribulations as
Right.
they all come together, and he has their influence because he's Santa.
Yeah.
And my segment of that was I played Bert Convey's son.
Got you.
And he, they had this kind of, fractured marriage with this awesome lady named Brooke Bundy, who, I just took a shine to as a kid, and she felt like my mom. And I think we ended up working on something else together years later. What was interesting to me is I realized movie magic when I was 5, because this whole story takes place in Manhattan.
Uh-huh.
And we shot it in downtown LA.
Wow, there you go.
And in the very first scene, like, I'm supposed to be coming back to our kind of loft apartment because the mother's an artist, which is kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
And I think that maybe like gave me my affinity for like loft spaces, because I've always wanted to live in loft. And I built like one of the houses I lived in as a teenager. We did the garage as a separate thing. I had a loft apartment in my house, and which was kind of rad.
Right.
And but we're on the street in this kind of downtown LA area, and I'm bundled up with like mittens and a winter coat and a toboggan hat, and it's probably 80 degrees outside. And but we're supposed to be Christmas time in New York, so that was movie magic, where I learned that you don't have to be in the city that you're shooting the movie.
There you go. Bert Convey had a crazy career too, man. He has a lot of credits. One of which is Banachek, which is like the namesake for my for my podcast. Yeah, Bert Convey always comes up. He's one of those guys. If I do enough stuff in 70s and 80s TV, Bert Convey's name will pop up. That was pretty cool. And of course, Gary Berghoff,
Yeah.
old Radar from MASH. That's
For
pretty cool.
MASH, yeah. And yeah, Convey's interesting because you grow up, him, you're like, oh, you're watching a game show, and oh, that was my dad in the that movie. But he really did do quite a lot of stuff, because
Yeah,
when you look at him, he's like, oh yeah, he's a good looking guy with gray
sure.
hair. No wonder he worked a lot.
Yeah, he did. He worked a lot.
Yeah.
So I was like raised on TV, obsessive about TV. In
Yep.
1984, and I've got my notes here, so forgive me, Andre, because I want to make sure I get it right. In 1984, you started like a killer TV run. So 1984, we're looking at St. Elsewhere, the A Team, Highway to Heaven. Legendary, particularly the A Team. But 1985 is what I want to talk about, because that gets even cooler. Knight Rider, Night Court, TJ Hooker, Twilight Zone, and It's a Living. I loved all of those. I want to start with TJ Hooker, because what I loved about that, what I want to talk to you about, is Shatner directed only 10 episodes of TJ Hooker. 2 of those 10 were the 2 that you were on. So you've been directed by William Shatner. What was that like, man?
It was really neat, because by the time the kids came to the show, TJ Hooker had already been a hit series for a while,
Sure.
right? And I think Hooker had always, he'd had the storyline that he had kids, but they lived somewhere else. I think they
Sure.
lived in Oregon or something. And they would talk on the phone or something, but they weren't ever really there. And then that season, they decided to bring the kids into the show.
Sure.
And that was myself and an
Little
actor
blonde
named
hair girl.
Jenny Beck,
Yeah.
who, if you're an 80s TV fan, was also the little girl in V.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I think
And
I saw that.
which is super cool. And
Yeah.
we were just the kids of this police guy on TV,
Uh-huh.
which was great. But then you also realize that this is William Shatner, and was Captain Kirk, and is now TJ Hooker, and all these other great stuff. It's there's something on the wing, and
yeah, Twilight Zone.
You realize you're on this big network TV show, which I had done several leading up to that, but you're not just a guest star in TJ Hooker, you're actually TJ Hooker's son. So that's right. That's a whole different thing. And then you get to work with Heather Locklear.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
And Adrian Zemed. Obviously,
yeah.
Obviously the good-looking crew on that show.
Yeah.
And
I never understood why TJ Hooker was still a uniform cop, because he was like about 52 years old.
That's right. And he would go in plain clothes and look like he was at the mall with his kids, but I guess he was just he decided not to go the detective route, so he's still he's still that beat sergeant,
right? Because I remember like in the intro too, like he's on the hood of the car, but he's always in the uniform.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But you work with. So did you have scenes with Zemed and Locklear as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, right
and what was unfortunate about TJ Hooker is so they brought the kids in finally for that season.
Sure.
And then the show got canceled.
Oh man.
But what ended up happening was TJ Hooker, I think, got picked up by another network for another season or two. And they did not continue with the kids. And so we only did like 2, 3, or 4 episodes, even if that, I can't remember how exactly.
According to IMDb, which isn't always accurate,
it's 2. It's 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a third one.
Okay.
And or we may have shot it and they didn't air it because they canceled the show. But what had happened was, still to this day, but back in that day, you had a contract with a network or a show that had dates on it. And whether that show was still existed or not, you were under contract. And so I think it was like a 6-month period or something that I was kind of stymied, because I was under contract with TJ Hooker, which was a show that wasn't happening anymore, except for on another network, but yet they weren't bringing the kids back. So I couldn't do anything else on a network TV show.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like in jail for a little bit of time.
So you're not available. Yeah.
Yeah. And, one of my, kind of shucks kind of things is there was a brand new show, I believe on ABC, that I had got cast in, but couldn't do it because the contract overlapped. And that was unfortunate.
And was it a big show, if you don't mind me asking? Or?
I don't know if you ever heard of Growing Pains or not, but
never even heard of it, man.
Yeah, never heard of it. Yeah, so good. Yeah, I'm glad.
Speaking of that, I've actually got I'll be talking to Jeremy Miller here towards the end of the month, I think.
Oh, Jeremy's great. Don't bring up that part of it, though.
I won't. Was that the role? Was it Ben Seaver? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, which would have been interesting because I think Jeremy was great on the show. And a lot of times when things like that happen and then shows are a hit, and that, you wish you were a part of it. I have a handful of those, of course.
Sure.
And look, I've also been on the other side of that story too, where, I've either replaced somebody or I got cast instead of somebody. We all have those stories. Sure. We all have amazing stories of things that we wanted to be in. And, that's just, it's just part of the game. And but it all worked out great because Growing Pains was amazing.
Sure. I have a friend who, when I was out in LA, and she did like a season or 2 of the OC, and then she booked like a great gig on Grey's Anatomy, where she was going to be TR Knight's love interest for at least the entire season, and it culminated. I guess the role was she got into an accident, she was unrecognizable, hit by a bus, something that. He got hit by the bus. I think it was him that got hit by the bus,
okay.
And he was unrecognizable, and she was the girl he had kind of, I think, saved. Like he saved her from getting hit by a bus. He got hit by the bus. He was unrecognizable. They're operating on him, and then they realized, oh my God, it's him. Anyway,
right.
Long story short, he was on the fence about staying on the show or not. Had he survived, she was going to be the love interest the following season. That was a new arc, because she just walked off, or she just left the OC. Yeah. Instead, he left the show. Right. So there goes, 1 or 2 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and it's like, damn.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing that show, didn't last very long.
God, that thing's been off for, I think, is it still on? Or it's been long. I've been married 15 years, and my wife and I used to watch that when we were dating. That's how long that show's been on. Man.
I remember watching the first season of that show, and look, I like you may or may not know, I'm a TV kid. Not only did I grow up on TV, I grew up on TV.
Got you.
And look, films are awesome. I love all types of film, but I'm a TV guy, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I love network tentpole shows, and I love procedurals, and I love cop shows, and I love dramas, and I love sitcoms. And but I think I got to like season 8 or 9 of Grey. I was like, okay, we're done.
Right.
It's like because I think what it is you evolve. If a show goes on for so long, you can actually age out of a show.
Oh yeah.
Unless they kind of go with you. But it's an interesting dynamic. But I mean, good for them. I mean, that's the dream, right? Is to get on something like that. And
yeah,
I think a lot of actors, really talk out of their wrong part of their biology sometimes, just saying, yeah, I would never want to get stuck on a show for 20. I was like, then what are you in this for?
right.
This is exactly what you want.
Sure.
I was like, are you insane? Like, I want to do range. I want to do different things. I was like, then don't ever get cast anything. I mean, come on. Then if you get on the show, then leave.
Right.
But no one ever leave. Like, they keep signing. Some people do. And the ones
it's not always a good move. Very rarely is it a good move when you quit the hit. So.
Sorry, David Caruso. But
Clooney's the only one I can think of did it well.
And maybe Johnny Depp. I don't know. Let's see.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Right. But those are 2 out of 7,000.
Sure.
But I tell that story, or not that story, but that context of that amazing type of thing a network show can be. Because one of my good friends is actually on one of the biggest shows on CBS, and he's been an OG cast member, and I think they just went into season 19 or 21 or something like that. And that's NCIS.
Yeah.
And I remember when that show. I remember when that show came out, and I'm still watching it.
Yeah.
It's evolved and it's changed, but that's what's great. Cast members have come and gone. Wholesale changes. Mark Harmon isn't even on that show anymore, but my buddy Brian is.
That's funny, man. Did Mark Harmon come back? I know he left. I thought maybe he came back.
No, I think he's. I think they're done. Gary Cole kind of took that. Kind of over that role and a different thing. Yeah. And even all of the agents, everything have changed over the years. And sure. With big network shows like that, there's a lot of machinations that go into, who's coming back, what's happening, and this show just keeps breathing, and because the fans like it. And it's one of my OG favorite shows of all time. It's and it's still going, and not just because my friend's on it. I liked it before I met him. Right. We met randomly playing golf one day, and then now we've been friends ever since we played golf. And we play golf all the time together. Nice. So that's that. I love that story, right? And I'm a Law and Order SVU junkie. Mm-hmm. And I am a Blue Bloods junkie. I just like the show. And I was an ER fiend. I know. Well, look, there's episodes of SVU, of Blue Bloods, of NCIS, and I love Chicago PD currently. There's episodes I've seen so many. I know the dialogue to them. It's like, wow. There's episodes of ER that I can go straight through the episode for you with the sound off, probably.
That's funny
because I've seen it so many times. Sure. And, we're talking about being TV, TV fans. Everybody asks, there's so much great content and programming out there now because we have access to a massive amount of stuff instantly.
Yep.
And everybody goes, did you see so-and-so? Did you see so-and-so? Did you see so-and-so? And it's like, where are you finding the time?
I know.
To watch all these shows. You watch Yellow Jackets, you watch Barry, you watch this, you watch Slip, you watch this, I'm like, I haven't seen any of that. But what I realized, it's not about the time, because I consume content.
Right.
But I will go back to, I will watch reruns of ER or of Blue Bloods or NCIS before I watch a new show on
That's
Netflix.
The thing, yeah. So you're rewatching a lot of the old stuff.
And I think it's just because I reached that demographic.
Yeah.
No, I love new stuff. I'm enjoying Barry. I'm watching Barry right now, so it's great.
That's a good show. That's a fun show. Yeah. Bill Hader was just leaving Second City in LA when I was getting there.
Oh, really?
So I'd see him sometimes. I didn't know he just started acting. I think he if I recall, man, what was Bill doing? He was like an editor or something. He had just started acting. Really? But I remember his thing was we do like what they call the improv jams, like at midnight on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. People show up and you just get up on stage and play improv games. Mm-hmm. And his thing was he would always get up there and do these impressions of like actors from the 30s and 40s that none of us knew what the hell he was talking about. But he was so good at it. And you knew something was there. You're like, this guy's special, but we didn't get the references. I mean, maybe like Vincent Price. Like I knew that one. But other stuff, you're like, what's going on with this guy? And then he's gone. He's on SNL. It's like, holy shit, he just started. That's
crazy. Yeah. It's never been corroborated. It's never been confirmed. And I never got noted, but apparently Hader was a Monster Squad fan. And that got someone had mentioned that to me, and I was like, oh, well then, and this is just after the actual first DVD came out, the 20th anniversary DVD. And so I had a copy, and I signed a note and I sent it to him. I said, hey, I heard you were a fan. I am a fan, because this is, right at his beginning, or kind of peak on SNL. And I was like, look, who's not an SNL fan, but love what you do. Hope you enjoy this. And I sent it to his manager. And I don't know if he ever got it, because I was hoping like Bill Hader calls him and goes, "Oh my God, thanks for the thing. Do you want to be on SNL? Come to let's go hang out at my house."
Yeah,
that never
Next
happened.
You're golfing with Bill Hader.
That's
you're
right.
Like the third lead on Barry.
I mean, what's funny is if you pay it, I'm getting ready to do an Instagram post, because I don't do them often, but I was in the mirror the other day, because I just had a birthday, and I was kind of like sweaty. I just got done playing golf or something, and I realized I'm watching Barry, and Stephen Root is amazing. In everything, right? But I started making these. I was looking at my face. I was like, am I sunburnt or something? And I was like, wait a minute, I'm making Stephen Root faces. And so I took like a collage of like selfies as me like trying to channel Stephen Root. And so I'm going to post those soon and be like, hey, if everybody needs like a, Stephen Root ever needs a son on a show, I'm right here, Stephen Root.
I love it.
But yeah, so that's my range. I'm trying to go from, I'm going to take my Zac Efron selfies too. So in case that we ever need to play brothers.
Sure.
But
he looks dramatically different. Have you seen him lately?
I have.
He broke his jaw or something.
It was a thing. I think he got injured, and that happens, unfortunately. So I hope he's okay. But anyway, Hader. But for some reason, SNL, there's been a handful of characters that are big Monster Squad fans that I have learned through other acquaintances. And Hader's one. Taron Killam was the other. And Kenan Thompson is apparently a Monster
that makes
Squad
sense.
fan.
Yeah,
So I'm trying to. I actually know his business partner, because we've had lunch a couple of times, and they just launched a new cool company. And Keenan's like, you go from like, oh yeah, Kenan and Kel, to like the longest running cast member of all time, and now they started their own company. Kenan Thompson's the new guy. Like I think Kenan Thompson is the new Ryan Seacrest meets Steve Harvey meets Cedric. I mean, he's going to be everywhere. Like he's going to host everything. He's going to be the guy. And I'm fine with that, because he's awesome.
Yeah, he's great. Who saw that coming? Him coming off of Kenan and Kel and then getting such a long run at SNL. And he was always good.
He was always solid. And I think that's why it works, because it wasn't sort of like, okay, you had a thing and it ran its course, and like, okay, now we need to recycle you.
Sure.
Or bring something else in that's different than you. And it happens on SNL. It happens on everything. But Keenan's been around, man, and I love it.
And I'll tell you, one of the biggest indicators too, is like an outsider watching. It's interesting to me. You see how people react to him, like, or what they think of him, and he's really well thought of. It seems like, because he's been there, and so many casts have come and gone, and they all seem to like him. They all like to work with him. So that's very telling, especially in that environment where it's so competitive and cutthroat.
Right. Because SNL is actually a little competitive, but then I think he's now gotten to the point where like you show up and you're a new cast member, you ain't messing around with Keenan. You ain't messing with a guy. You ain't messing with a guy.
He's got tenure.
It's right. It's like he can snap his fingers and you're not on the show anymore or something. It's like, that'd be great.
Right.
But
just
in case anybody wants me to come on SNL.
Yeah. Anyone listening,
we'll bring back all those cast members and do a Monster Squad bit.
Yeah. I mean,
wait a minute. That's a great idea.
Well, we talk about Monster Squad. I mean, one thing I wasn't thinking this, you said that, talk about a movie that's ripe for a remake or a reimagining of, right? Is that ever been talked about?
Well, after the and we'll go back to the TV stuff. I know you wanted to talk about that too.
Man, I'm having a conversation.
And I'm good. You'll have to cut me off because I'll talk forever. But when the resurgence of Monster Squad kind of started in 2007, in 2009, they were actually remaking it. Rob Cohen, who, is Rob Cohen, a giant producer and giant director of big, splashy studio movies, was actually a young kind of new producer on the original Monster Squad. He was a producer on Monster Squad. And he saw some of this kind of fan reaction, I guess, and said, "Oh, we need to remake that." So they apparently secured the rights at the time, which had always been an issue. The rights issue of Monster Squad is always in question. And teamed up with none other than Michael Bay's company to remake Monster Squad. And they started trying to break the story, try to develop it with a team of scriptwriters and then another team of scriptwriters, I think. And they could never really crack how to do Monster Squad in a current fashion.
Okay.
And then right at the time they were working on it, that's when Universal was launching the Dark Universe. And what a lot of people don't know is apparently the Dark Universe, they were kind of going to do the Marvel Avenger things with all the creatures.
Gotcha.
And with all the monsters, sorry.
Sure.
And the first one was the Dracula Untold movie, but no one knew that was a launch of a thing because no one saw the movie.
Right.
And I don't think it was that bad of a movie, if I remember. I think I've seen bits of it. But then they realized that their whole big thing that they were kind of trying to do wasn't gaining traction. And then they said, is Tom Cruise available to do The Mummy? And so Tom Cruise is in The Mummy. And that movie didn't do well either. And so they're like, okay. And at that time, Platinum Dunes, which is Michael Bay's company that was working on the Monster Squad remake or reboot, said, look, if Universal is doing the Dark Universe, there's no reason for us to do Monster Squad because it's, bringing this thing in. And which I don't know necessarily think that's true, but apparently in the industry, it's like, you're not going against this juggernaut that's doing this whole thing. And then so the reboot died.
Got it.
And then the Dark Universe died. And it's now being resurrected, and it's going through smaller budgets, better story, telling directors, going through Blumhouse, and everybody loved The Invisible Man, with that Lee Winnell did, and I think that's the better way to do those stories anyway. Instead of these giant $100 million studio pictures, do a smaller budget, put yourself in a box to tell a cool story, and you end up with something like they're doing out of that world now.
Absolutely.
So that's neat. So they were remaking it, but and that was starting in 2009, 2010, and then they killed it in 2014 or whatever. But I don't think we've seen the remake of Monster Squad. We've seen the reboot of it in the current context. We've seen that story a handful of times.
Sure.
And we don't need to have another title that says the Monster Squad was made in 2025. If you want to have the return of the Monster Squad, that's a different story. I think a sequel. No, I'm not speaking because I'm part of it or anything, but I think that's a better idea than doing the retread,
gotcha,
or reboot, because I think it's more interesting. But like I said, it's always a rights issue, and there may or may not be some clarification of the rights issues that have happened this year. Or last year. So, who knows? Maybe there's something out there. I think there's other cool stories that are Monster Squad universe related that may not be a sequel or may not be a reboot. But Fred and Shane have been asked more than once to come in and do that with giant studios and streamers.
Sure.
And there's been some good stories, where where they talk about something and they're like, sort of like Stranger Things. We want that, but Monster Squad.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like Fred, and you've got to sit there and look at him and go, but that is like, we've seen it. We've seen the remake of the Monster Squad. It's called Stranger Things. We don't need. You're trying to jump off the platform that is Stranger Things, but Stranger Things is a sort of a version of the Monster. Like, I think we've already seen it, so that's not what we need to do here. Which is kind of funny. And then there's a great article out there. I can't remember what it is, but someone can look at it. That I think they're at. I don't think it's at Netflix because that's Stranger Things, right? But it's at some studio, and Shane and Fred are in there, and according to the article, and I've heard this over like drinks as well. But they're like, hey, we want this, but with this, and so the kids are older, but they come back, and then they have to relive the thing. And Shane goes, "That's it." And the executives are like, "Yeah, that's exactly what we want." And he goes, "No, that's it." He goes, "I know, that's exactly what we're after." And he goes, "No, that's Stephen King's It. It just came out."
Yeah, right. Same thing.
They're like, "Oh, what?" And like, "Yeah, see, you had to come up with something fresh." I have a lovely idea for a sequel, but it's been almost 8 years since we kind of hashed that out. But it's fun. I think that's the only thing that works. But I think there's a great prequel.
Sure.
A great prequel series, because one of my favorite things in Monster Squad, the movie, that we get with the crawl is, it ends with they blew it.
Right.
But no one knows how they blew it because they cut the scene, which I don't know why they shot it. and you can find it somewhere in deleted scenes every once in a while. But long story short is, in the 1800s, Van Helsing and his band of, freedom fighters, as they're said in the script, they attack the castle and they actually chase down Dracula and they stake him and they kill him and they put him in a wagon. And then they go up to the castle to do the limbo thing. Well, they leave a guy who I was called the Van Helsing red shirt, and around the campfire, and out of the mist come 3 vampire brides, and he shoots one of them with his crossbow, and the other one's, he kills her, and then the other one's choking him, and he's about to get killed, and he's flailing around, and he grabs a stake and kills her, and he's like, "Aha, I made it!" But what he actually did was he unstaked Dracula in the wagon to save himself. And then we all know in vampire lore, when you unstake a vamp, they come back to life. So right. Duncan sits up in the wagon and looks at him. It's this great shot. And then that's how they blew it. But they cut the scene. And so we don't know. So the thing is he gets away. And that's why he's walking around until our day.
Right. And did they cut it for time? Why did they cut it?
Time. The movie's only 83 minutes.
That's true.
And I don't know why. And it's not like other scenes that we cut for time and budget on the day while we were shooting, which that happened a couple of times as well. But this was shot and done. You can see the footage. And I think it's a very big answer to a lot of plot questions.
Sure.
But my thing is what was he doing for that? Because he said he's got to go and walk around for another 100 years until it's balanced and be able to smash the amulet and take over the world. And then we get in his way. So I think that's why he's so pissed that we're in his way.
Yeah.
But what is he doing for 100 years?
And that's a fun series.
I think that's a 10 episode series, and each episode goes over 10 years of what Dracula's doing. And I think, a la what really I've always had this idea for a while. I loved what the original Wonder Woman did during the World War I era. That World War I happened, but it was because of these supernatural that were kind of, pulling the gears and pulling the strings and making people do bad stuff. And I think Dracula, you go back and kind of a la Forrest Gump, and you could put Dracula in all the bad shit that happened over the last 100 years. That he's sort of having a little bit of machinations in it, and I think that would be a really cool series.
No, for real. Dark. Yeah. He can redo like historical events and areas in the background
Yeah. And if you actually go back, to the origin of Vlad the Impaler, the actual Dracula guy, which I just got introduced to an amazing novel that's about this thick, called The Historian, which kind of goes back into that. And he goes way, way back to, the actual region of Eastern Europe and Romania that they were from. And, he was actually this warlord against the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s. And I was like, whoa, that history goes way back, but I want to see what this guy, once he became the thing and lived, but got foiled in the 1800s and got away by the skin of his teeth, and has to wait another 100 years to take over the world. What's he doing during those 100 years? I think that's a cool story.
It is a cool story. I dig it.
Yeah. So
the movie also featured one of my favorite actors. He hasn't done a lot, but David Proval.
Oh, he's done a ton.
I mean, when I say a lot, not a lot of big stuff. Like I don't think a lot of folks know David Proval's name.
No, he is he's a character actor on the side that just fills a screen with some radness. Whether it's an Italian guy from the Bronx or a gangster, or he's been in all these huge movies just as these side guys. It's great. No, he's amazing.
Yeah, he was in my favorite season of The Sopranos. He was Richie Aprile, and just God, he was menacing. And he's like 5'7".
Yeah, a little tiny guy. And,
just so menacing. But I just love anything he does, man. I know he's also an acting coach. I know he's like Eddie Murphy's coach. I think on like 48 Hours or something.
I mean, he's been around, and he worked a lot. He works with all those greats because he's got that look and that voice and that style, which I think is interesting. Why he's in this one, kind of throwaway scene in the Monster Squad.
Right.
But everybody asked me, like, what's my favorite scene in the Monster Squad? It's that scene.
Oh, is it really? Well, there you go.
It's the scene of the airplane with the pilots, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the movie.
Right.
And it's just these two really funny dudes. Right. And I've always said, I want to see that series.
Like, see what?
I want a series about those two dudes.
Oh, those two guys? Yeah,
like sure. It's like whatever their cargo company. It's called Browning Cargo, right? As an homage to Todd Browning. But like they fly around and they deliver shit. And I'm like, that's a series.
Yeah.
with David Proval, and I forgot the other guy's name, it's blanking, but I was like, those two dudes were so funny.
Yeah.
That I think that's a hilarious show.
That's just funny. I didn't for years. I didn't realize I was Proval until I went back and looked. It's like, oh my gosh, it's David Proval. Yeah.
But
Because I
that's
knew
what
most from
happens
The
in movies.
Sopranos.
You get these great character actors as these kind of filler roles playing characters, and we have another one like Stan Shaw, plays, Detective Sapir.
Great character actor.
Come on, one of the best.
Yeah, he's I always think of him as Big George in Fried Green Tomatoes, right?
That's right.
Like yeah, he's just that guy's that guy. He's been in so many things. Yeah,
yeah. He's the champ in Harlem Nights.
That's right.
His son is actually an actor, and they're on this big BET series right now that he's enjoying talking about, and looks fun. And but what's really interesting is he plays the kind of character in. Not The Water is Wide, the Lords of Discipline. Or no, I'm sorry, The Great Santini. The Great Santini.
Oh, okay, Great Santini. Sure.
And he plays Toomer in The Great, because that's a book written by one of my favorite authors as a kid. So, and it's with Robert Duvall, and it's a great movie. And
Toomer was the one that the son was friends with. Am I right? Is that?
Yeah. So Toomer was the kind of the developmentally challenged African American kid that lives in the school bus. That of course, the Great Santini's son, who's the lead of the main part of the book, befriends this kid, and they have a relationship, and that's Stan. And so I'm like, dude, you were the Great Santini.
That's wild. I don't know the movie well, but like you, I know the book.
Yeah.
I know, yeah. And
I started reading Pat Conroy stuff. I got an assignment, and I was doing an English class in summer school in 10th grade, and we had to read The Prince of Tides. And I was like, this was an interesting story. It was dark but lighthearted, and having some Southern, kind of touches to it. Being, my mother's from the South, and knowing, all my family and stuff that lived back here and have been back to the coast of, and it's all sort of that kind of Charleston based feel. Sure. Yeah. And so I became a big Pat Conroy fan. And every single one of his books has been made into a movie except for one of them, not counting his nonfiction book. But sure. I related to him a lot more, as a kind of a duck out of water, or a fish out of water, growing up in an era, and he thought differently than the group of people that he was with. And he was a basketball player at the Citadel, and I thought that was cool too. And
sure,
I kind of harkened back to the time that he was in college, would have been a great time to be a college basketball player.
Speaking of, I hadn't thought about that in forever, but there's a great reference to the Great Santini. I forget the actor's name, the one who played the son, Robert Duvall's son in the Great Santini. He went on to be in Roseanne.
It's oh my gosh,
can't think of his name.
I'm blanking on it.
He was married to someone famous. I think he was married to Bonnie Raitt. Wasn't he married to Bonnie Raitt?
I'm just totally blank on it. It's
I'm sorry,
Michael. No, we can look it up here. Hang on. But this is going to happen. So we're using technology because my old brain is.
He played Fred on Roseanne. It is Michael. You're right. Michael O'Keefe.
Michael O'Keefe. Damn it.
There you go. Yes. I forgot it. Right. But Michael O'Keefe was later on Roseanne. He played Fred. And there's this one episode where at the end, over the closing credits, they're playing John Goodman's playing basketball, and he keeps bouncing the ball off his head. You going to cry? You're going to cry? And as a kid, I didn't get the reference. As I got older, I was like, oh, that's what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. But imagine, and Michael O'Keefe does a great. He always shows up on some of our great TV shows now too, as an episode on some of our favorite TV shows that we mentioned too. It's always he's great.
Yeah, he's been working forever.
Yeah, it's it started as a kid actor. It's those are the stories you like. But awesome body of work there too.
I wanted to jump a little bit. There's something I wanted to talk to you about if you're cool with it. You did again TV stuff. 1987. You did a short-lived series. I wasn't familiar with it. A short-lived series called Mr. President. Mm-hmm. And why it jumped out at me is for a million reasons. First, it's created by Ed Weinberger, right? Legend. That guy created Taxi. It starred George C. Scott, who's one of my favorites. I've actually lately been on a George C. Scott run. Really? I watched The Last Run, Hardcore, just watching some old George C. Scott movies. Also had Conrad Bain, Madeline Kahn. What was that like? I mean, if you don't mind me asking, just working with that team of people.
Well, even before that, the kind of context of the show was gigantic, because this is just prior to Monster Squad coming out and bombing, which is a good thing. Previous to Monster Squad, I had actually sort of had this very a kind of unique situation that I was sort of under a development contract with a bunch of stuff at 20th Century Fox as a studio, because I had done a handful of TV shows for television icons, Michael Zinberg and Randy Zisk. And Randy Zisk was like a 20-something, and Michael was probably 40 at the time. But he had already been, big, EP and showrunner on like Maude and things like that. So Michael came in and was developing these shows that actually had, kids in it, and some were like dramas, and some was a family, kind of relationship show. And he kept casting me in these shows. Okay. And then because of Zinberg and Zisk, I did 2 or 3 series that I was a lead in, and they all went like 1 or 2 seasons. And this is sort of, you mentioned the IMDb resume of all this great TV show. There's a reason for that. But I was under this kind of development deal at 20th Century Fox, and I did guest spots on other shows like The Wizard and stuff that were off that lot. And they were developing Zinberg. They were developing more shows, and there was even talk that they were developing a show that was like, I was the lead, or they were finding some sort of adventure show or something. So then I went off and did a handful of shows. Still had that tie-in with Zinberg and Fox, and then I went and did Monster Squad, and then Monster Squad's about to come out, and Fox becomes a new network. So Fox had originally like 6 or 7 shows as a brand new network that they all launched. And I had, just before Monster Squad, I had done a show that I played a recurring character on that was a cop drama called Heart of the City. Mm-hmm. And it starred Robert Desiderio, Jonathan Ward, and Christina Applegate.
Yeah. I saw them.
They played his kids, and I played the criminal. It was the first time I ever played. I had played a 10-year-old drug dealer who in the pilot is arrested by Desiderio because I shot another drug dealer in a crack deal gone wrong.
Wow.
And so I played the street kid, and he gets involved with my character, and he gets involved with my mother, who ends up being Kay Lenz. And because their mother died in a very 80s TV show Reason, a drive-by. And she died in like a gangland drive-by hit. I don't know what she was doing in that, but anyway, so they had this flashback. But there was 3 kids on that show: Jonathan Ward, Christina Applegate, and myself. 2 years later, Fox becomes a new network. All 3 of those kids end up on shows on the brand new network coming out of that Fox show. And Jonathan Ward was the lead of a show called The Adventures of Beans Baxter, where he kind of played this like super intelligent, nerdy inventor kid who solves crimes. I think it was very fun.
I remember it. Yeah.
Great idea. And then Christina Applegate, of course, becomes Kelly Bundy on Married with Children. And myself, I actually got cast in 2 shows. I got offered 2 shows on the brand new network. One was a show that was Johnny Carson's production company was producing. Okay. It was created and show ran by Ed Weinberger, and it was starring George C. Scott and Conrad Bain. Madeline Kahn joined in the 2nd season. It was guaranteed for 2 seasons, and George C. Scott had never done television. And he was coming to play the president of the United States. And one of the stipulations, if he was doing television, was that he was going to be the highest paid actor in the history of television.
Get out.
And he was on that show, which I believe sparked something down the street on the lot at Paramount where Ted Danson said, wait a minute.
Right.
I've been on the #1 show in the world for like 10 years or 5 years. I want $1 million an episode.
You sure?
And so Ted Danson started that thing. So I got offered the show and I knew that was going to go for 2 seasons, and they were paying more than scale, which if anybody doesn't know, scale is what the, SAG, your guild, your union, it's the minimum wage for, certain types of shows for actors. They were paying, a multiple of scale as an offer, for my role. The other show, nobody that was associated with it was kind of notable. Whereas Mr. President was guaranteed to go for 2 seasons. This other show, the pilot wasn't even guaranteed to air. And nobody associated with it was anybody of note.
I'm afraid to ask.
and it was paying scale at the time. You probably don't want to know.
Oh, man.
But so I chose, of course, Mr. President, because at the time that was the no-brainer. And Married with Children went on for like 100 years.
Was that the other show?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, the Faustino role, Bud Bundy.
Yeah. Which I known David, basically
You had a
forever.
credit with him.
And
Did you not work with David Faustino, or am I making that up?
well, his brother Michael is in Monster Squad. He plays
That's
Eugene
right.
in Monster
That's
Squad.
right. That's
So,
right. Okay.
I grew up with David because we're the same age, and
Yeah.
Michael's younger, of course. But we see each other all the time, and knew his parents well, and we were decent friends for years,
Sure.
and he ended up becoming Bud and becoming this worldwide icon, and and Christina was great on that show, and everybody was great on Railroad Children. I just don't think the world knew, like, it was very blue, it was very
Sure.
crass, and I don't. If you had a crystal ball, of course you take that show, but even industry executives were like, we I don't think this is going to be a thing.
Right.
And what you needed to, since we already kind of circled back with O'Keefe on Roseanne, is that's why Roseanne hit, because Roseanne kind of started almost all similar time.
Mm-hmm.
And I never understood the appeal of Roseanne when it first came out, because it was like, these are just kind of like angry, frustrated, regular people that we see every day. This isn't TV. TV is supposed to be fantasy and like these things that don't exist.
Sure.
And boy, those storylines and those characters connected with America so well. And if you had that other mindset, you were completely wrong. And that's why Married with Children nailed it.
Yeah.
And now, granted, was it this kind of comical, kind of far-fetched version of an American Family? Not that far. Wasn't that far? Not that far-fetched.
Right.
But and if you directly compare it to gigantic icons playing the president of the United States and living in the White House, yeah, no one wants to watch that.
That's funny, man. I mean, I get why you chose it. I mean, you made the right choice. Really.
Oh yeah. At the time, it's absolutely no brainer. But
what was George C. Scott like, if you don't mind me asking?
A force.
Uh-huh.
I was 14, 15 when I did that show. We did 2 seasons. It had a big switch. It originally was it was a comedy, but it was a single camera film comedy shot. So it was one of the first things that started doing that.
Right.
And then when the first season ended, they switched back to straight 3-camera video live audience sitcom style.
Interesting.
So they were trying to see if that would catch and change viewership, because that single camera comedy time was very new.
Right.
But then later shows ended up doing it very, very well.
It's like it was ahead of its time. That single
it was a little ahead of its time.
A lot of early shows that did single camera were really great, but didn't make it. Like they just might have been a little too early. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I really think were Mr. President, I don't think the talent was the problem. I think the writing was the problem, because yes, it had these iconic television names that were trying to write comedy in 1989. That were really, really funny writers in 1979.
Fair enough.
And Married with Children had new, blue, crazy, crass, salt of the earth type. Like, hey, let's write this shit.
Yeah.
And it caught on really well.
I get what you're saying, man.
I think it's sort of kind of stuffy. And was the comedy there? Yeah, but it was sort of like, especially when they switched over to the sitcom style, it was bang, bang, setup, joke, bang, bang, setup, joke, haha, audience reaction, go to the next bit. And I think if they had kept with the single camera, but changed the writing and made it a little bit more current and less stuffy, it would have been funny. Now, were the people funny? Look, we had Conrad Bain on the show, who'd been on 2 of the biggest sitcoms of all time.
All time.
Maude and Different Strokes.
Yeah.
Super nice guy. But you asked about George. An absolute presence.
Yeah.
A force. Was he mean? He could be.
Yeah, he was a known drinker. I mean, I'm not besmirching the man. I think it's pretty much out there. Yeah,
he came in with that gravitas. Is really the only way. I did think it very interesting that you have someone like Ed Weinberger, who you mentioned is literally one of the biggest names in the history of television.
Right.
And George C. Scott banned him from the set.
Wow.
Ed Weinberger was not allowed to come on set if George was there, because all they did was fight about stuff. And so you're just sitting there trying to do your lines and do your work and learn. And this is when we switched to sitcom and Madeline Kahn joined the cast. So that's a whole other tornado of energy and comedy coming in. But look, I think there was a lot to learn there from George and Conrad and Madeline Kahn that I think some was absorbed, some was intentionally observed and taken to heart. And then I think, much to my dismay, I think a lot of it was just missed because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
Where I should have been, because you're just like, I don't realize what I'm in right now.
Right. You're also young.
And
Yeah.
so, but there's I remember a lot of great stuff. I do, but he was also very nice and very protective. Sometimes he could be a little gruff, but I think that's just his nature. There was only one time that I don't think I felt uncomfortable, but where it was like, I am the target,
right,
of the wrath of George C. Scott at this moment.
Yeah,
and that's exactly, how it comes up.
Yeah.
And like, had I seen Patton before then, or at or during? And I was like, yeah, that's him. Like, that's him. And it was when we were doing the single camera season.
Okay.
And, of course, if anybody knows filmmaking, or, you have, your master shot, you have a 2-shot, and then you have your coverage, which is your close-ups. And what that means, like, okay, if we're on your shot, it's just you in the frame. And if you and I are doing the scene, then I'm standing next to the camera right here to give you something to look at and work off of, but it's a close-up. So, you obviously don't look in the camera, you look at the other actor. And apparently, you're standing very close to the frame of the camera, so the eye lines were correct. And apparently the 14-year-old, professional actor that I was, which I had been working for, a decade. But apparently I was doing the scene with George. It was his close-up, and I was shifting my weight from one foot to another. That was the last time I ever shifted my weight doing anything.
I bet.
So George kind of stopped not only the camera, he stopped Paramount, and I think he stopped the Earth from revolving for about 3 minutes, while he MF'd me for about 5 minutes.
Oh man!
And was just giving me the business about how to do this. And it's like, it's your fucking responsibility as the other actor to not fuck with the guy. And I'm like, and so it worked because I was frozen.
Right.
And that's kind of the effect he wanted. So I didn't move for the rest of my life.
You're still there.
And I'm still standing next to that camera and not moving a hair on my head. But look, the funny thing was, he's absolutely right.
Right.
The delivery of the message may have been a little off. Sure. But the whole place stopped, and it was just, George C. Scott sitting here motherfucking a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Just I'm like,
that's still
and I'm coachable. Story. I get it. I'm coachable, but I was like, lesson learned. And so I think what's funny is, you're so scarred. You see, I'm like a statue if I'm working with other people. It's like, I should have just gone to mime school and gotten a scholarship right away. Would
have been a whole different animal if you pissed off Conrad Bain. I can't imagine him yelling at anybody.
Yeah, I don't think he does get mad. He was a really, really cool dude, very funny, very gentle. And then, like I said, Madeline Kahn joined the show in the second season. She wasn't an original cast member because they replaced the mom, but they didn't replace the character. They got rid of that character and brought in the aunt. Okay. Which was this whole thing, because the mom just left. She just left and divorced the president, and which was kind of cool and bold.
Did they really bring that? Was that really the storyline?
Yeah. And Madeline Kahn came in to kind of like take over and help out with the kids and just kind of be a motherly figure. And I think it was a genius move, because there's nothing, talk about a force. Sure. There's nothing like a Madeline Kahn, and there never will be. Move over everybody else that thinks you're Madeline Kahn. You will never be Madeline Kahn. And they were all very, very cool, very, very funny, very, very skilled, a lot of experience by this time. This is 89, like they've all done all of their big stuff already. Right. And, some of the stories and things that I remember, them just sitting around, I was like, it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Right on, man.
Were your parents always on set with you?
Yeah. Somebody always is. Okay. By law, but also by tether. And, when you're a kid, working, you have to go to school every day. So there's a studio teacher, which is also the guild advocate for the kids on set. Yeah. And there's two kids on that show. It's me and the awesome Maddie Corman, who has done a ton of stuff as well. And we played brother and sister for 2 years. And she's a New York based actor and does a lot of theater and has been in a ton of movies. And I love to see her pop up on TV. And we're still social media friends, and we text each other and say, "Hey, saw you on this." And but she ended up turning 18 in the middle of the show, so she didn't. So it was just me left as the kid on the show.
Okay.
And had a great studio teacher, for all seasons on that show. And, those are things that you remember, and you still have those relationships. And it's I don't say it's difficult, but it's more work if you're a kid on a set, because you have to go to school every day. You have to follow the laws, you have to follow the protocols and procedures, and there's things you can and can't do. And there's less time in your day to get the work done, because 3 hours at least a day is taken up by being in the schoolroom. So,
right.
There's different ways to get around that by banking hours and doing things like that. But, it's fascinating to watch the machinations of production work. And I love doing sitcoms. I think that's one of the, I've done a few.
Sure.
And some were, amazing fun.
You did
but having
Mr.
that live
Belvedere
audience
with Seth Green and Mr. T, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but talk about a cool sitcom. I love the show and I love the guests.
That's right. And, that show had been on, for a number of years. And that was, I was older. I think I was 16 when I did that episode. And what was great about that was kind of full circle. So it was 3 years after Monster Squad casting. And, Seth Green had screen tested for Monster Squad and had come out for one of the first or second times ever from Philadelphia to screen test for something in LA. He worked a bunch out of New York when he was a kid, but he'd only been to LA a handful of times, once or twice at this time, to screen test for this film called Monster Squad, and he didn't get the role. And I had to spend like an entire day with him at the Beverly Center, hanging out with him and his mom, and he didn't get cast. But they ended up staying in LA after that experience. And
interesting.
I think it's kind of one of those kind of butterfly effect that that the world is a better place, that Seth Green came out for that, but stayed and became Seth Green.
Yeah.
Because he's done some awesome stuff, and he really is a really cool dude still, and always was, always has been. And, so you fast forward a couple of years, and he's churning out all this, cool work as a kid. And circle back, I just get a guest spot on Mr. Belvedere, which had been on for already a number of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I had known Bryce. Bryce is a year or two younger than I am. And, he had some recurring friends on the show. And one was Seth Green, playing kind of this, kind of like the bad kid, like the bad influence, kind of weird kid on the show.
Sure.
And I show up as kind of this slick dressed kind of kid that dresses great. And, it's an interesting thing where I just moved to town, I think the storyline was, and I meet, but I can't read. So like we're in like 9th grade or something, and I can't read. And so Bryce Beckham helps me learn how to read in the episode. And so I had just gotten, through life, by traveling around. I think the dad traveled around or something, and as an executive, and I never caught on and learned how. So I faked it my whole life. And so this is the storyline. And what was really unique about that, I remember that shooting that, because like I said, I love live audience stuff. Like if you've ever, it really, you work all week and you block it out, and then the audience shows up on a Friday, and you shoot, you do 2 separate, recordings of the show, tapings of the show. And boy, it is this feeling. And I did my first sitcom when I was, 9 or 10. And, when there's 200 people in an audience and a warm-up guy and like cameras and 50 or 60, crew members waiting around. And then like, whenever your entrance into a show and you're walking out, it's literally walking onto the stage. It's like walking onto a stage production. And it's just a great feeling. And there's an energy and there's a connection. That's why it's live audience, because it's comedy and it's timing and it's these breaths. And I worked with some really great people on sitcoms before, and then, to show up on Mr. Belvedere, and I don't know if they had announced it or the audience knew, but Bryce and Rob Stone and Tracy Wells.
Mm-hmm.
Had all been kind of on this hit TV show for years, and they had a teen, magazine following as well. So I think their audience skewed kind of young, because 3 of their cast members were teenagers.
Yeah.
And I think that's smart to have a good cast member. You got Bob Uecker and, Christopher Hewlett playing Mr. Belvedere, all these great, faces and names. And the intro scene was in, the cold open of the show. And Hewitt and Bryce had a little exchange because they always had this great little antagonistic relationship, right?
Yeah.
And then he walks off and the doorbell rings and they open it and I'm standing there. And we're supposed to start this scene. And he's like, oh, hey, came on, Chris or Kyle or Craig. I think it was Craig, something like that. And I don't know if they didn't, but Beckham opens the door and the whole audience, apparently, which unbeknownst to any of it, was filled with teenage girls.
Ah.
And then they just light up and go bonkers. And like it goes on forever. Because I had just started, I was kind of in the peak of having the kind of, teen scene celebrity type thing, and being in the magazines and it's sort of, awesome to be in that situation.
Wild, yeah. But
they just go nuts for like 2-3 minutes and they have to cut the scene and start over and like, okay, we got to calm down. We got to calm down. And that's Andre Gower. And then it like pipes up again. And okay. And the director's coming over the intercom's like, we've got to keep moving. We got to be quiet. And so we have to reset, do the scene. Christopher Hewitt comes out, does the cold open, the thing. They walk off, or he walks off. The doorbell rings. They open the door. It happens again, and it happened like 2 or 3 times. And it took so long to actually get this first scene done that I think Hewitt started to get a little pissed. And now we're running behind. And now we're like 10-15 minutes behind of a sitcom shoot, which is no bueno.
Right.
And that was a very, very cool experience. And everybody was like, "What is happening?"
Right.
And I just had fun, with that episode, working with everybody the week. But then just that Friday night to have that happen was very cool. Which I also was lamented a little bit that the executives didn't take that to note and add me to the cast of that awesome show. Because if I'd had that big of an audience reaction on the intro for this guest star, it's like, that's a character you want to bring back. So,
sure, man.
I would have loved to join that cast like Seth did, but he had a great recurring role and a couple other kids. But another great, just one-off sitcom experience.
That's a cool story, man.
Yeah.
What's next for you, man? Actually, I hear you're coming to my neck of the woods. You said you're coming to Chattanooga, huh?
Yeah, there's an awesome film festival that's actually having its 10th anniversary this year in the end of July, I believe. It used to be in April. Now it's in July, called Chattanooga Film Festival, and it's run by a really cool cat named Chris Dortch, and his dad helps out. His name is Chris Dortch Sr., and he's a really cool dude too. And he's actually used to be, a local sports writer of some note. If anybody follows high school and college sports in the central and eastern Tennessee area, but Chattanooga I went there for the first time years ago because they flew Ryan and I in for a Monster Squad screening and a Q&A as the thing. And I just realized that this was a different type of vibe. And then 2 years later, that's where we premiered Wolfman's Got Nards. So we actually got to. We were slated for a much bigger festival called the Overlook Festival, which was in New Orleans the next weekend. But Chris, I was like, look, this is kind of cool. Let's premiere it there, kind of get that first kind of taste, and then we'll go to Overlook the next week. And we had great experiences at both. But it's their 10th anniversary, so everybody's celebrating kind of rad off films because they didn't have. For the last 2 years, they didn't have in-person festival there. And Chattanooga is just a cool town. The group is cool. Yep. It's very kind of off. It's a little offbeat. A lot of cool filmmakers from all over. It's just kind of a fun, weird party weekend. And I've enjoyed going back and forth a couple of times. And I haven't been in a number of years. And so I'm looking forward to going back. Supposed to go back at the end of July and celebrate that a little bit. And hopefully, I don't know. I haven't seen they're announcing their programming. There's actually a film that I got to do earlier last year that's kind of campy, weird, demon head exploding movie called Retro Freaks that we had mentioned before, I think. Sure. That may or may not screen in. I don't know if they've actually announced the programming or not, but it'd be kind of cool to talk about that as well.
We'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, and different projects like that, like Bloodstreams. There's another small local movie that we did out of Ohio called Demons Within, directed by Stephanie Hensley. They flew me and actually we got Ryan in there for a day. I haven't seen any rough cut or final cut of it. Hopefully it turns out well, and hopefully my addition to that added something positive. I hope so, and I hope it turns out great for that crew, because it's fun being a part, like I said earlier, about something and helping out up and coming or first time or local filmmakers that, maybe they never do anything again, but you were a part of that one experience that they had. And I kind of really enjoy being connected to stuff like that. And whether it's a short film or, local feature. And I started, really responding to those in 2018, 2019 and said, look, we're missing some opportunities to enjoy being actors and stuff like this. It doesn't always have to be the big network show or the big, studio picture. And let's start responding to some of these if they're legitimate productions and can bring you in. And we started looking at that. We being, Ryan Lambert and myself. And, we did, one or two things. And then pandemic shut everything down. Right when we had this great idea, everything kind of ceased. And but now that we're coming out of that, and I didn't die in July of 2021, which is a good thing. I think for some, and I'm able to kind of ignite that kind of access and hopefully people still want me to show up and be in their films. And it's always fun to, to add, what little bit that you can. Because films are fun. And, these can make careers, whether it's, something local or something big. And, we've been talking about, talking about TV guys and, the cool stuff that I've done throughout the years that you mentioned. And I mentioned there is a reason I got to be on all these rad shows. And if you look at my television resume, which, we have been talking about some of it today. There's some really cool experiences on there.
Oh, absolutely.
From Knight Rider to A-Team, things like that. We talk about Shatner and TJ Hooker. There's a reason I got to do so many of those opportunities is because my television career is basically a lot of open time, because I was the guy or the kid that did 6 or 7 television shows that only did 1 or 2 seasons instead of doing one show that went 8 seasons and everybody knows. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a good thing in the regard that I was able to go to in and out of different things and work with these different people instead of be stuck with one thing. Look, like I said, we all want that show that goes on 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Because then you get reruns and syndication, and then, that's a thing, that's a career, that's retirement. And most importantly, that's retirement. And, but I didn't get that. The longest series I did that I was leading on was 2 seasons. It was Mr. President. And then, I have great stuff like, and a lot of shows that we end up doing, I think were just a little ahead of its time.
Right.
Like a show called Baby Makes 5, which, came out, starring Peter Scolari, who was coming off of Bosom Buddies.
Yeah.
And he was a television star before Tom Hanks was Tom Hanks. And, I think, look, Tom Hanks is fantastic. And I know Tom Hanks. I met him way back in the day. But Peter Scolari was a different type of talent, and very underrated and very underserved. Yet not really, because he won like 2 Emmys, and
one of them late in life. He got one for Girls.
Got one for Girls,
yeah.
And he was extremely funny on Newhart. And I used to go to that set and watch them tape that show, and because Peter taught me how to juggle when we were doing Baby Makes 5, and we used to warm up the audience and do a 2-man juggling routine. And Peter's the reason I got to do Circus of the Stars twice. And because he set me up with the producers of that show, he said, hey, this kid's athletic and has balance and can do, like, you should try him out for Circus of the Stars. And I did that show twice because of Peter Scolari, because of that show that went 5 episodes. And that was a hilarious show. And and then coming into something like Fathers and Sons, which is one of the first show with Michael Zimberg and Randy Zisk, was about 4 boys and their fathers.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great concept. Let's have a show about 4 young kids that are, obviously, you run the trope. It's very much, kind of Our Gang, Monster Squad. We have a different type of kid and they're different type of dad. And it was supposed to be about a coming of age friendship story, but a relationship with your dads. And I thought it was a great show. And now, granted, we did run into a snag, which I think took some punch out of the show. And like I said, it had 4 boys. One was sort of like the redheaded kind of chunky kid, and his dad was Merlin Olsen, coming off of Little House on the Prairie and Father Murphy, and an NFL career.
Right.
And
Highway to Heaven. Was he not in Highway to Heaven? Is that?
That's he was, but
French. Victor French.
That's Victor French. Yeah.
I got him confused. I apologize. Yeah.
And then we had the kind of smart, nerdy kid, and his dad, Nicholas Guest, who was Christopher Guest's brother, from, all the Christopher Guest movies.
Sure. Yeah.
And Nicholas Guest's brother was a funny guy, and he was like a doctor. And then we had another kid, Hakeem Abdul Samed, and his dad was a cop. And then you had the cool kid that wore just rad clothes and had awesome hair and wore all these like vintage kind of 50s clothes. And that was me. And my dad storyline was the only one of the four whose parents were divorced and always had this kind of flaky kind of woman chasing, broken family dad. And that was, I thought, was a really great topic for the mid 80s because everybody was relating to that, which is interesting because a lot of people relate to the family structure in the Monster Squad because that family's falling apart.
Right.
And so we're kind of having the same thing about how does this, kind of 12-year-old kid who dresses awesome and have this cool group of friends deal with his family. This show's called Fathers and Sons, but he doesn't have a relationship with his father because he's always flaking on him and canceling on him.
Right.
And what was very interesting about that, if we go back to all these great people I've worked with, we talk about Bert Convey and George C. Scott and Conrad Bain. My dad on this show was Ricky Nelson.
Oh, wow.
Who was returning to television for the first time since Ozzie and Harriet.
Wow.
And this is a big network NBC show with an icon, an Americana icon coming back along with Merlin Olsen and new actors like Nicholas Guest and all these kids. And we shoot the pilot and Ricky Nelson and I have a scene and we're supposed to be going to our friend's beach house to spend the weekend as a, dad and kids weekend. On the way, we stop to get gas and my dad picks up this hot chick in the show. Like we were, it's in this attractive woman, fueling up her, kind of hot rod or something. And he's like, oh, and he ends up connecting with her and saying, hey, here's $100. Go have fun this weekend. I'm not coming. And that was the crux of the show. And that was in the pilot. And we shoot the pilot airs, and it gets picked up for like 5 more episodes as a mid-season replacement, because this was old television terminology. Back when network shows had runs, and then there was hiatus, and then they tried out new stuff, and then if it caught, they would do the next season. So we got picked up for another 4 or 5 episodes after the pilot aired, because all these great faces and names are there. In between the pilot airing and our shooting the next episode is when Ricky Nelson dies in a plane crash.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And so I think that kind of took a little of the wind out of the sails of the star power of the show. And therefore the show doesn't get picked up. And, we covered it in the next 4 episodes of like the dad just is never there. So I have conversations with the phone, but it just wasn't the same. And I think that kind of took the star power out of that show because Ricky Nelson died. And so we don't get to do a whole full season or 10 of this awesome show because can you imagine having a show about 4 boys as friends growing up as like 7th graders, and then that could go all the way to college. That's a series. That is a series. And I think it was a little ahead of its time, and unfortunately, since they went down in a plane crash and didn't make it, and I think killed the show also. But so I was with my resume with this TV thing is I had all these shows that went 1 or 2 seasons with these great things, but nothing that went for 8 seasons that everybody knows. I was a part of a lot of those shows as guest spots are recurring, like Mr. Belvedere or My Two Dads or the Hogan family. I joined the cast of the Hogan family for 1 season. It was supposed to be like 2 or 3, but ended up being 1. And that was it's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity, but when you don't get to do the show that goes 10 seasons, you get to do a lot of other things once or twice.
Got it. Fair enough. So it's kind of a bittersweet accomplishment.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, still though, it's, it's never too late, man.
Oh no. Yeah. From your podcast to all the producers' ears. Absolutely. And look, if someone said, hey, would you rather be on show called X for 8 seasons and you did that only, or chop down a tree with Mr. T? I don't know. That's a hard choice.
That is a hard choice. Well, I appreciate you doing this today, man. You've been so gracious with your time. I really, you answer every question. So anything you want to leave with? Do you want to list your socials or?
Yeah, please, hang out, follow me on, that new thing you might've heard of, Twitter. It's at Andre Gower. On Instagram, it's at Andre Gower Official. And that's the only socials I'm on. But please also, if you are a Monster Squad fan or a fan of nostalgia or a fan of any type of movie that really connected with you, please follow at the Squad Doc, or go check out Wolfman's Got Nards, which is the documentary about fandom and about how people can connect with movies and change their lives, all told through the lens of Monster Squad fans. Because that turned out very, very great in my mind, all due to the work of my amazing production crew that made that film with me, led by Henry McComas and Wes Caldwell and all the folks at Pilgrim Media Group, which is it's been out domestically for a year and a half now, or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you can if you like Tubi or Pluto TV. I love Pluto TV because they have a Jeopardy channel and a retro TV channel and a Blue Bloods channel. Check it out there if you don't mind commercial interruptions. If you don't like ad breaks, please rent it or digitally download it on iTunes, Prime, anything like that, where you get your digital content, or buy the Blu-ray. So it's it's great. And a really cool product just dropped in Germany where they remastered Monster Squad as a Blu-ray and then put Wolfman's Got Nards as a second additional disc with sort of a kind of a lookbook and kind of a storybook packaging together, because European countries do releases so much better than we do here. And that just dropped like 2 weeks ago, so you can order that. You have to have an international Blu-ray player, I think, but a lot of us do because we're weird content nerds. But just and check out the new stuff, check out Retro Freaks, check out Demons Within. Support people like Derek Wayne Johnson and David Ryan and Stephanie Hensley, because the more we talk about those people, the more they get to do their second, third, and fourth projects, and the more chances I get to go and act silly.
Love it, man. Well, I'm going to take advantage of your kindness. I'm going to email you. I'm going to see if I can't hook up with you in Chattanooga. I'll go there. I'll promote it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe I can say hello to you because I'm in Chattanooga all the time. So
let's do it. Yeah, we'll go have pancakes at Aretha Frankenstein's,
sounds great,
which is the best pancake you'll ever have.
Absolutely, Andre. Thanks so much, man.
Hey, man, appreciate it. Good to see you.